Hi, Gianna.
Hey Terry,
How are you?
I am doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for coming on to my show tonight and going into the depths.
Oh, my pleasure.
Okay, first of all, where are you? No, you don't have to tell me exactly, but what part of Texas, what town are you in?
We are in the Dallas, Texas area. We're in one of the smaller suburbs just north of Dallas.
Okay. I was in Dallas when I was in the military. I visited there a couple of times. I was stationed at Fort Polk, Louisiana.
Okay,
And so
not
I
too
went to
far away.
Dallas. I took that little journey where Kennedy was going along and then he got shot.
Yes, the book depository. Yes.
It's kind of it's a weird little trip because when you look at the building and then that grassy knoll with the trees and that there's a little
Mm-hmm.
bridge overcross, and I think he was coming off Elm Street, right, in downtown
Yes.
Dallas.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. Just I mean, I was on a tour, but I was just doing it with at the time my girlfriend. So
Yeah, that's kind of one of the must-see things when you come to Dallas. Everybody wants to go visit the museum and see the grassy knoll and kind of a piece of history. Not necessarily a piece of history that Dallas wants to be associated with, but
yeah,
what are you gonna do?
absolutely, absolutely. So all right, so let's go back to the beginning with you. Did you grow up in Texas? Like that's where you've been your whole life, pretty much?
I actually was born and raised in Oklahoma, so not too far away from Texas, and I moved to Texas when I was in my 20s. So I consider myself a Texan now. I have spent more time in Texas than anywhere else. So,
So what part of Oklahoma? Because I had two very close friends. I had a friend that lived up in Bartlesville, and I had a
yes.
friend that was in Hominy. And I went there a few times when I was in the military to visit. So I got a chance to see a beautiful state.
I actually grew up in the southwest part of the state, not too far from Fort Sill, Oklahoma. So if you know anything about the Army post in the U.S., that was maybe 20 miles away or so. Close enough that when the artillery was out there doing their exercises, sometimes it would rattle the windows a little bit, depending on which direction they were shooting that day. So,
Yeah, when you bring that up, I remember my friend that lived in Oklahoma there. We went down to, I can't remember the name of it, but it was not too far north of Fort Sill. It was this little lake, and there was a hamburger joint there that served the biggest hamburgers I've ever seen in my whole life. It was the size of a dinner plate.
it was probably Mears. You probably went to Mears,
Yes.
Oklahoma and had a Mears hamburger.
Oh
Yes,
my God, it
yes,
was so good.
yes, yeah. The lake up there is probably Lake Latonka. It's kind of a popular camping, fishing kind of lake that's not too far from Fort Sill. So,
Okay, yeah, yeah. So when you were growing up in Oklahoma,
hmm
I'm curious because I know so much about that state with my friends. Ever see a twister?
one came close.
Really?
Before we moved to the southwest part of the state, we were actually living in Norman, which is closer to the center part of the state, closer to Oklahoma City. And we did have a twister that came through. Goodness, when I was about 8 or 9, we could see it a few blocks away, and we were all scrambling, trying to take shelter. But I've never been closer than that, thank goodness.
Now, were you there when the Oklahoma City bombing took place?
Yes, I was actually had already moved down here to the Dallas area, but yeah, I remember everything, coming out on the radio and TV and just being totally shocked that something like that could happen,
Yeah.
especially in Oklahoma City.
So how was it growing up in Oklahoma in terms of what were you into as a girl, a young girl? Like, did you grow up being an athlete? Were you a nerd? Like, what were you like growing up?
Oh gosh, I'd probably put myself in the class with the rest of the nerds. I was definitely not an athlete, very disappointing to the local basketball coach since I was so tall, that they were really, really wanting me to play basketball, but I was more interested in keeping my nose in a book, and I was in choir, and I've played the piano since I was like 5 years old, so I was more into music and books and that type of stuff.
Speaking of how tall you are, so
Yeah,
when you were growing up, were you always taller than the other kids, especially the girls?
I was taller than all the girls and taller than only one guy in my graduating class. I think our sophomore, junior year, we had somebody move into town. And I was so thrilled because it was a guy that was taller than me. So I wasn't taller than everybody else. So that
Okay.
was an exciting thing for me.
Obviously, and I know there's a certain crowd or whatever that might be interested in this kind of thing. So when you were so tall like that,
Hmm.
a lot of times people want the opposite of what you are. Like a brunette wants to be blonde, a blonde wants to be brunette, short person wants to be tall. Did you feel comfortable with it, or did you wish you were average or shorter, or were you like happy with that?
I was always a little self-conscious because I was so much taller than everybody else. And I really don't think I felt comfortable with who I was, probably not until my mid 20s or so. I finally decided, like, hey, this is me. You're either going to love me or you're not going to love me, and I just went with it.
Because of your height, what was your physicality? Were you a tall and lanky girl? Were you always curvy? Like, how would you describe yourself at that time?
Oh, I was very thin and lanky in high school, and I really didn't develop the curves until my 20s when I actually started putting on a little bit of weight. I was really skin and bones in high school, gawky
Wow,
teenager.
wow, wow. So was that one of the reasons why you wanted to have that look? Like, was that something you always kind of wanted then, or did you just, how did that take place?
I've always liked kind of the glamorous pinup, old glamour Hollywood 40s and 50s, that type of style, as far as fashion and makeup and dress. And I always thought that was fascinating. Even to this day, I still like watching all the old black and white Hollywood movies. I like Turner Classic Movies, all those kind of channels. So yeah, I've always had an affinity for it. And growing up in a small town in Oklahoma, that was very out of character for pretty much everybody I went to high school with. So yeah, I definitely didn't fit in, with the crowd, the popular crowd at school. And then when I went off to college and got into my 20s and started working and making different friends, and I kind of felt like that maybe that was a route that I could go.
Oh, I think that's great. I think that's wonderful. I think it's really important, especially for the young people out there. You don't have to be what everyone else thinks you should be, whether it
Yeah.
be your parents, your friends. I think you should just go your own route, whatever that may be, whether you're, a musician, a computer nerd, a actor, filmmaker, guitar player, whatever. Don't you agree?
Yes, yes, I agree. I've tried to encourage my teenage daughter to find out who she is, and develop whatever skills that she has and her abilities and not worry about everybody else's opinion about what they think she should be like. You don't have to fit into whatever mold everybody's trying to tell you that you need to fit into. Just be yourself. You're unique. Be yourself.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. What point did you decide you wanted to be a model? What point did that happen for you? Was there something you saw, as you were, going through your life, whether it be a magazine, a movie, a rock star, whatever? What incited that? And I'm not criticizing it because that's something I really like myself.
Probably in late 20s, early 30s, I finally felt comfortable enough with who I was and what I look like. So I started looking into modeling and what part of modeling did I think I would fit into, and ran across more of the busty glamour type of modeling. And I thought, hey, that might be something fun to get into. That way I would get to dress up and be more glamorous versus, maybe more of a fitness model or runway model or something like that. And I've always been a big fan of Dita Von Teese, if you know who that is. I like her kind of old school glamorous style. So I thought, okay, maybe I can be a blonde version of that and come up with my own type of spin on her look and be a blonde glamour model.
It's almost like an extension of your femininity, right? Of being a woman, this
Yes.
kind of bombastic, vivacious, bodacious, whatever you want to call it. Um, when you were deciding that, did it take a long time to figure out how to go about it? Like, what was your Did you have to investigate it, talk to any other people that did it? Like, how did you go about that process?
Did a lot of research on the internet, finding out, who kind of the top models were, what were they doing? Could I do the same type of thing? And coming up with a plan, what look did I want to go for? What would I need to do to get there? I mean, obviously a few surgeries have been involved along the way, so it's like kind of planning for it and almost kind of like coming up with a business plan. This is where I want to go. What steps do I need to take to get there? So it's been a long process. I mean, goodness, it's probably been 5 years or so when I really started getting serious about going through all the different changes and trying to develop the look and develop my brand.
When you were starting to do that, um, if you take yourself back to the beginning of it, what was it like as far as your mindset? Were you scared? Were you nervous how it would be for your own body? Like, how you'd adjust to that? How about your family, your coworkers? Like, how much of that did it play in your mind, as you were doing that? Because I'm sure it must.
Yeah, I mean, it was a whole range of emotions, scared, nervous, a little bit anxious. What is everybody going to think as I'm transforming into basically a new person, as
Yes.
far as physically, what I look like. Family's been supportive. I mean, they know this is something I've wanted to do for a long time, so they still call me by my real name, and Gianna is, my modeling name, my stage name, so
Yes.
the two are separate as far as my close friends and family and my coworkers. I mean, they notice, but none of them have really came and said anything like, hey, what are you up to? What are you doing? I'm sure I'm probably the subject of conversation in the break room sometimes. It's like, gee, what is she doing? But yeah, but no,
Yeah.
it's been fun. It's been a fun transformation.
One of the things I noticed as a, person that's always appreciated that look in a woman. I
Hmm.
remember when I was a boy back in the, 70s and even slightly before that, you didn't see a lot of busty women. I mean, honestly, they were very rare. I remember if you saw one as a boy, it would just jump out to me at least because I liked it. So, I guess before my time, it was like Jane Russell and Jane Mansfield and Marilyn Monroe. And then during
Yeah.
my childhood time, I can specifically remember, you know, like Kitten Navidad and Adrienne Barbeau and Lonnie Anderson and
Oh yeah, Lonnie.
Dolly Parton.
Yes.
That the girl that kept going on the baseball field, Morgana, the kissing bandit. I remember
Oh,
her back.
okay.
I remember
Hmm.
her and the Barbie twins in the 80s. So,
Yes. Yes.
and what was really interesting regarding that was I have a friend of mine who doesn't actually like women. And we were watching the first Friday the 13th, maybe a year ago. We had both, of course, seen it many years ago. And he said to me, you know what I noticed so different about the first Friday the 13th versus now? If you look at the girls, they have like no breasts. Like now you could see it. And so obviously it must be for various factors, whether it be augmentation or push-up bra. Maybe
Yeah.
girls are a little heavier now because they don't work out as much and they're sitting around on a computer. So it's really interesting. A
Hmm.
guy that doesn't even look at girls said, look at the girls in Friday 13th versus the remake. They look totally different,
Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah. I mean, things have changed definitely through the decades. I mean, from my personal experience, I really started noticing maybe in the 90s, seeing a lot more women with a little bit of a bustier look, and I'm like, hey, how is that happening? So that I think that's really when it started kind of coming to my head, like, maybe I want to start looking into those type of options. So favorites was Sophia Loren. I always thought she was a very sexy, glamorous, type of woman, and I've actually even been compared to her by some of my fans. Like, boy, if you had darker hair, you would look more like Sophia. And I thought, well, that's actually a compliment. If you're going to compare me to somebody, that's a pretty good comparison.
Absolutely. Very classy. And she looks amazing even now. Yeah, the same thing kind of happened for me in the 90s because I remember if I go back to, this is something I've never told anybody, but make interesting for the show.
Oh,
I,
hey.
I remember when I was a boy, and I grew up in a very strict Mormon household.
Okay.
No drinking, no smoking, no drugs, no. And I
Yeah.
kind of retained that foundation, but I haven't been an active Mormon for 40 years. But when I was a boy, I remember I was a very good artist and I could draw pictures, and that kind of relates to how I became a filmmaker as well, and a writer, etc. And I remember I used to draw these pictures of these really well-endowed women that in my mind at that time were like a fantasy. You would never see it in reality.
Yeah.
And then in the 90s, I remember I went to this horror film convention in Washington, D.C. I was not there as a filmmaker. I was there just as a fan. And I went to see Jurassic Park because it had just come out around that time. As I'm going through the mall, I see this newsstand with all these magazines. And up in the top right corner was this picture of this super busty blonde. And it caught my eye like right away. And I go, what the heck is that? I'd never seen anything, honestly, I'd never seen anything like that before. As I got closer to it, it said Score Magazine, #1 in big boob.
Yeah.
And I picked it up and I was like, I didn't even know something like this existed. You start flipping through the pages and all these models were incredibly well built.
Yes.
And that kind of led me into kind of, getting that magazine. And eventually I saw SaRenna Lee, who's a legendary
yes.
Big-Bust model. And we end up doing a movie together.
Yes, I saw that when I was looking over things on your website. Yeah, I mean that look is becoming more prevalent, it's becoming more popular, more accepted. And even in some what I consider more the mainstream films and shows and everything, that look is showing up where before it was kind of like, oh, you're into that type of industry, and it had a little bit of a stigma attached to it.
Yes.
So, and that
I say unrightfully so, because I think
yes,
should be
yeah.
like.
Yeah, I mean, I get questions all the time about the type of work I do or the type of film that I want to do, and constantly ask, oh, do you do porn? And I'm like, no,
Good.
that's not what I'm into. That's not part of my plan on what I want to do in my career. I don't mind pushing the envelope, and being glamorous and sexy, and there's, up to a certain point, but there's a line that I don't want to cross. And that's definitely on the other side of the line.
That's really good. I think that's great that you have a vision for that. You stay with it because you want to be comfortable, you want to be happy, you want to live out your dreams, obviously, right? So
Yes.
yeah, and it was interesting to go back to the story with SaRenna because you might be interested, especially since you want to do movies and acting. What was really weird back at that time was it was before I had a computer. It was before I had an email, obviously. I saw her, I believe, in December of '93, that issue that came out that year. You couldn't help but notice her, obviously. So I ended up, not right away, but at some point I wrote her a letter, a snail mail letter.
Yeah.
Sent it out. And I didn't hear from her for like 5 months. She's busy, she's out on the road.
Yeah.
At the time, she was a featured dancer and all that. And eventually she writes me back, film I wanted to do called Perishing Hearts, which to this day I've never made yet. There was a part that I wrote for a character called Corey Stone, and I wanted this really voluptuous blonde. And I never saw an actress with that look enough, if you know what I mean. So I told her about it, and she said, I'm definitely interested. We kind of talked by phone a few times over the year or so after that. But I didn't have any money in set to make the film or anything like that. I ended up getting this offer to make this film called Evil Streets, which a friend of mine wanted 3 stories put together as one film. And he says, I'd like you to direct one of them called The Downfall of Johnny Garrett. And then I'd like you to write a new one and make your own film. And then we'll recruit another director for the 3rd film, which ended up being a friend of mine. I was like, okay, I want to work with SaRenna. So I didn't have a story, but I said, I want to work with her. So I reached out to her before even starting to write. And I said, what would you think if I wrote a story for you for this little anthology movie? And she said, what would it be about? And I said, well, I think we should do something you kind of know. So why don't we make it about this dancer who's being stalked by this fan?
Yeah.
So this way you're kind of breaking your feet into acting, but you're kind of doing something you already know. And we didn't have like anyone financing the movie. So it was basically, we're making this movie with very little funds. So I really consider her like a creative partner because she flew herself up from Jacksonville, Florida on her own money. And we had her stay at my house with me and my wife. And, we made the movie over like a week and a half. Because remember, it was a shorter film. She actually flew herself back up when we started selling it at conventions. And I give her so much credit for that because she didn't have to do that. But she knew we didn't have like we didn't have financing in place. But the way I think she looked at it is it was a chance for her to act. And I didn't realize she had been in plays and stuff as a high school student.
Okay.
So she always had that desire to be a performer. What you might find interesting, maybe even your fans, was when we were doing the movie, I'd actually never planned to have any nudity. And one of the other directors came to me towards the end of the shoot. I think it might have been the last day, and he goes, I think you should put something in because she's got a big fan base. They're going to be expecting that. If you don't do that, you're going to disappoint them. So I'm always a respectful guy. So I went over to SaRenna and I said, what do you think? Does it make sense? And she said to me, well, if I was on the stage and I remove this and I'm going back into my dressing room, I wouldn't have that on.
Yeah.
And I said, well, do you want to put it in the movie? Because for me, it wasn't something I was thinking about, believe it or not. You'd think it's obvious I was, but I wasn't. And so she goes, no, I don't care. I think it makes sense because it's real. She said, let's do it. So we did it like kind of last second. And what's amazing is when the movie got reviewed, they said, oh my God, there was all these scenes with, where scenes like that. And the truth was there was probably like a minute and a half. That's what always blows people away. Someone, especially like with her look and her appearance,
Yes.
I think they couldn't get around it. So some people almost called this like an X-rated movie, which it had no sex.
Yes.
But it was because of her look. It's weird because it pleased some people, but yet other people it turned them off.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, people see all my photos and videos online, and then they always make an assumption that, well, why aren't you showing more, or why aren't you doing this? And I'm like, hey, what's out there is what you see, and that's what you're going to get. That's just not my persona, and then they're always expecting more because I think they can see that when they go view, Instagram pages or Twitter profiles of other busting women out there. They offer that. And so they
Yeah.
kind of lump us all in the same group together and think, hey, well, if one's doing it, then the rest of them must be doing it. So, and I think that's even actually maybe turned off a few people that would become fans because they have these expectations. And then they start chatting with me, and I'm like, no, that's not part of what I do. And,
Yeah.
and that will turn, some people away. And I'm like, well, hey, you can go check out somebody else's profile to get all that stuff.
Yeah. And you know what, to be honest with you, as a lifelong boob enjoyer or whatever, a big breast, um, sometimes when you see a woman with just a dress and the cleavage, it's almost better than seeing everything, if you know what I mean.
Yes, yes, and
Leave
that's
some to your imagination.
correct.
And
Yes,
and no one is. I think there's very few of us that are perfect, right?
yeah.
That everything is perfect, right? So sometimes that mystery is better, right?
I think it is, and that's the whole point of what I try to get across in the things that I do is if you leave something to the imagination, you let the viewer exercise the biggest brain, muscle in their brain, let them imagine and continue the story and give it the ending, in their mind of how things are going to go instead
It
of
makes
just
a lot of sense to me.
revealing everything.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes a lot of sense to me. So here's a question. So as you mentioned you've had more than one surgery, and
Hmm.
obviously I'm assuming that you've gone bigger from where you started. That whole process, without, you don't have to say anything if it's too personal, but there must be some sort of a good feeling about that on your part. Like, is it almost like a guy that is working out and getting bigger muscles and you see the veins coming out and there's this bigger chest and it gives you this kind of empowerment or this, you feel good about yourself. Is that in any way kind of played into, why you've done it? And again, I'm not criticizing it.
Yeah, I do think that that's a part of it. I've always had this vision in my mind of where I wanted to go, kind of the Jessica Rabbit, very curvy, very voluptuous, very sexy, all eyes turned when she walks in the room kind of look. And then that's what I've kept in mind when I've gone in and requested different surgeries, change this here and change that there. It was always with kind of an ultimate image in my head of what I wanted to look like, and then And it is very empowering. I feel like I'm becoming the more womanly version of myself, so it's a lot of fun. It can get expensive, that's kind of the downside of it. Everything comes with a price, but I consider it part of, my business plan and just steps to get where I want to be in the next few years.
Absolutely. And one of the things I admire about you that I think is so great, and it's a problem I think a lot of people never follow through on their part. Obviously, I'm guessing you're not, in your 20s now, right? Obviously, I'm certainly not. So what's great is that I think a lot of people are either afraid to live out their dreams, whatever that may be, especially as they get older. And the fact that you're doing it at the time you are, I think
Mhm.
is really admirable. And I think it takes a lot of courage. More people should pursue it like that. I think a lot of people just kind of give up, either don't have the energy or the commitment to it. And the fact that you're doing what you want to do that's making you happy, I think that's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm definitely not in my 20s. I'm not even in my 30s, so I'm a little bit older than the average person that would be trying to start in this industry. I'm competing with women that are half my age, I mean, so that does make it a little bit more difficult, but I think that I come across with a maturity that they don't have just because they are in their 20s. They haven't had a lot of life experiences yet and a lot of challenges. And I think that gives me an appeal to a wider audience than some of the younger girls might
Oh,
get.
absolutely. And I'll be honest with you too. This might sound weird coming from a director, but I've worked with a lot of people in the last 30 years as a filmmaker. I mean, I've been making movies over 30 years. And I can honestly tell you that best, the worst people to work with because of their sense of entitlement, their lack of work ethic, their laziness, their distraction by using a phone all the time is the people in their 20s. I mean, when I
Yes.
work with someone in their 30s, their 40s, their 50s, their 60s, they are so much better to work with. I think they come in with not only more life experience, but they seem
Mm,
to have a way better work ethic. They seem to
yeah.
also understand what you sacrifice to kind of do these things. Like, when I've made some of my movies, I've never dealt with big budget. So sometimes you're not there for money. And
Mm,
people are making sacrifices along the same as I am. And the ones in the 20s don't see that way. They're just like, oh, you know what? I got something better. I'm out of here. I'm leaving. I'm not coming back tomorrow. I've never seen any of the people like in their 40s and 50s do that 60s. They're like, so I kind of write movies now where I'm not dealing with those folks as much. First of all, I find them less interesting and they're
yeah.
certainly harder to work with.
Oh yeah. I mean, even some of my coworkers, 30 and younger, I just kind of shake my head, that some of the things that they do. And I'm like, what are you thinking? I grew up, you know, high school in the 80s, in a very small rural town, very strict Southern Baptist parents, so they instilled in us from a very young age, you get out and work, you work your butt off. If you want something, you're gonna have to work for it. It's not gonna be handed to you. And I think my parents, did a great job instilling that in us. And I've tried to instill that in my own children and my nieces and nephews, hey, you've got to work for it.
Absolutely. I remember when I was making a movie called Devil's Five, which won Best Horror Film 2 years ago. And it's coming out this summer on a Hollywood movie company called Random Media. And Ralph Sheepers, who's a heavy metal rock star, we flew him in from Germany, which took a lot of our money. We didn't have a big budget. They flew in. We were on the shoot, and he kept saying to me, "Why are all these young actors being so difficult? Here's this guy coming in from a different
Mm,
time zone that's essentially a rock star, and he was working his butt off, never complaining. And these little kids in their 20s are like, oh, I got to go home early. I don't feel like being here tomorrow. He couldn't understand it. I mean, I certainly didn't appreciate it. And, as a director, you remember that. And you certainly, I mean, there's things you can do as a filmmaker when you're working with someone. You could cut their parts down. You could cut them out of a movie. You could put their name last in the credits. These are all things that happen when you don't work the right way on a movie. You know what I mean?
oh yeah, I mean, there's been times when I've been having to wear a bikini and splash around in the water and like, oh, hey, this is so much fun, and I'm like freezing my butt off, you have to do it. It's part of the job, and you have to take it seriously and treat it like a job.
When do you think, and again, I may not know this, but when do you think, I think it'd be great if you did a shoot for, like a mag, I don't mean score or something like that, if that's not what you want to do, but I think it'd be great if you got some really creative photographer to shoot you in setups, because I know fans would like to see that. Have you had that as
Yes,
a plan? Is that something you're planning to do? Because I think that'd really benefit you.
it is something I've been trying to work on. There's a photographer out in Las Vegas that I've seen the work that he's done with other people. And so I'm trying to get something in that works with that. I mean, honestly, COVID has kind of put a wrench in my plans, trying to get a lot of stuff accomplished. There was a lot of things that I filmed, as far as video shoots and photography last summer down in Florida. And they're still working on trying to get a lot of that released and hopefully in the next few months, I'll actually be able to get to do some of those things that I have lined up. If the restrictions ease up a little bit and the country opens up, then there's a lot of things in the pipeline. So we'll see what happens in the next few months.
Okay, good. That sounds great because I think a lot of people be interested in that. So as far as you wanting to be in films,
Mm-hmm.
TV, etc., what types of parts do you think be good for?
I mean, probably I don't know if I'm really the mainstream Hollywood type, but I've always kind of been a fan of more of the independent films. The smaller budget, everybody on the set, kind of films, and I thought that would be kind of fun. I've always liked horror films. I've always thought those are kind of interesting. The sci-fi, science fiction type of things. And I've been a big Hitchcock fan. I like the suspense thriller, make you think about what's going to happen next kind of film. So I think it'd be fun to be involved in a film like that someday.
Oh, that's great because I'm an independent filmmaker, so I'm kind of off the Hollywood system. I mean, not that I wouldn't want to get there, but it's really weird because it's almost like a double-edged sword. You want to work on a big movie, but all I hear from other directors and friends and people in my many years of studying this is a lot of times you get there and then they take away your decision making, your power, they control it because it's big money. And I've seen it with some of my favorite directors, whether it be John Carpenter, George Romero, etc. You see these guys that had independent minds and make these brilliant films, and then when they get to the big factory out there, it's almost like they whitewash them down and take away their. It's almost like they castrate their qualities.
Yeah, I think they lose a lot of the control over the creative process. And so it just becomes, let's turn out another film, and then the director and the writers kind of get left behind in the dust, which is really sad because I think it has an effect on the final product.
And I find this a really fascinating subject matter. In terms of people that see you, whether it be your fans online or in person, I don't know about you, but I want to hear your story of this. I find it a really interesting contradiction because a lot of people don't admit that they like big-breasted women.
Hmm.
Yet, if you go to my YouTube channel and if you look at how many things have been viewed, look at every one of the videos, the count. If you look at it, you'll see like 150, 200, 500, 1,000, maybe 2,100. Dolly Fox, who was Score Magazine Model of the
Hmm.
Year 2 times, she was going to be in my movie 2 years ago. And she ended up getting an infection, which right before the shoot. And I,
Oh,
and I had to end up replacing her with a different actress. But
okay.
she had her tickets. We were all set to go. She did a video to promote the movie when we were raising money on crowdfunding. 872,000 people have viewed her video.
Yes,
The other
yes.
people are like 100, 150, 300, maybe 2,000. So when people say, "Oh, I don't really like boobs. I don't like big breasts," I think it's being false and fake. They don't want to admit it in public. I guess the way I'm different is I'm not ashamed to admit it. I like it. I've always liked it since I was a boy. I can go on my YouTube channel and I can see what people search for. I can go on my website. I can see what they search there. On my website, because I reviewed this movie called Codename Diablo. Did you ever see that
Hmm.
movie?
Yes,
So
yes.
I went to the premiere in New York City,
Okay.
and Mary Madison Love was there, and Lily 4K, and Dolly Fox was there. So I took pictures and I reviewed the movie, met the director, etc. Because of that, a lot of people search for those actresses on my site, as well as SaRenna Lee, because I worked
Yeah.
with her. Do you know that those ladies have like over 1 million hits on my website? There is nobody else I've worked with that comes remotely close to that. So the fact that people say, I don't really like big boobs isn't cool, this, that, it's not true. People are kind of closet fans. They won't say it
Mhm.
up front, but the results are right there. Go look at my website and look at my YouTube channel. You'll see it. Dolly
Oh,
Fox.
oh, I believe it. I've followed some of the other big bestie ladies, just to kind of follow their careers, see what they're doing, keep up with what's going on, and Dolly is one of the ones that I've seen a lot online. And yeah, I mean, they have huge followings. Anything that's got their name attached to it, they have a lot of fans.
Now, do you find for yourself, do you find that people will not admit that they like it in person, but they really do? And I don't mean women. I mean women, obviously that might be different. Maybe they don't want to look like that. Maybe they can't understand it. Maybe they're intimidated by it. Because I find when I was working with SaRenna, some people kind of scoffed at it. They kind of like snickered at it. But they might just feel uncomfortable or whatever they can't understand. But what do you find with your life with the folks either in person or online?
I do think that there is an intimidation factor. Yeah, and plus with me being tall and busty, it's like I'm overwhelming, all the times, if I'm out and about, like at the local bar around the corner from our neighborhood, it's like I go there all the time. I'm on a first name basis with the lady that owns the bar, So I walk in and kind of sit down at my normal table, but there'll be, different people that come in sometimes and they're like, this gawking, and then some of them are actually brave enough to come up and talk. They're like, I've never seen anybody with boobs as big as yours in person, and then they're just this overwhelmed and so happy. And then I'll kind of glance around the room and see kind of the women and have kind of a snarl on their face,
Yeah,
so you can
angry.
tell that they're not happy, and I'm probably jealous, to a point because they're not getting the same type of attention. But yeah, I mean, there is an intimidation factor, because they can't believe that they're actually seeing it in person.
So now, how does that affect you? Like, does obviously you're a nice person, you can tell just by talking to you here, but how does that make you feel? Does that give you, does it make you uncomfortable? Does it give you pleasure? Like, how do you find that? How does that fuel you inside?
It makes me happy, I mean, I like getting the attention, because that's kind of the whole point, is putting this
Obviously.
image out there, wanting to look attractive, wanting to look sexy, wanting that type of attention. And yeah, it's fun, it's a lot of fun. Yeah, my normal everyday self, without all the glamour on, is kind of more shy, more reserved, not that far out there. But when I kind of put on the Gianna persona, it's a big difference. It's a lot of fun.
Good. It's like you step in another pair of shoes, right?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
it is.
And speaking of shoes, now here's something I thought would be an interesting question for you. So being so tall as you are,
Hmm.
a lot of times the models wear heels. So is that something that you avoided because of your height? Or are you like, you know what? I want that too. I'm gonna look like that. I'm gonna roll with it. Like how do you approach that?
In high school, I think I probably avoided it a lot because I already felt pretty uncomfortable being so tall. But again, when I got in my 20s and really started getting into fashion and kind of finding my own fashion sense, the high heels were it. I mean, I didn't care if I was 5 feet taller, than the guy I might have been dating at the time, 5 inches taller. I liked it. I kind of liked the little intimidation factor of being taller than him. Of course, my husband, he's a tall guy. So even with the heels, we're almost eye to eye. So that's a pretty good match.
That works. That's really good. You know what? You know something, that I had to say to you because when I saw those models back in the 90s, Minka, Serena, etc.,
Mhm.
they I remember thinking at the time that, wow, a woman, that's like as big as you'll get. But when we got into maybe past the 2000s, and you start
Mm-hmm.
having Chelsea Charms and B
Oh yeah.
Shine
Mm-hmm.
and, Lily and these other girls, they're way bigger than SaRenna was and Minka and all these other. Isn't it amazing? It's almost like the professional football players. They say offensive linemen used to be like 270, 260. Now these guys are like 350, 370. Do you agree that it's just exponentially, it's like boom.
Yes, yeah. We're busting out all over, pardon the pun. Yeah, I mean, and I've even noticed in like the last 3 or 4 years, when I'm trying to build up and get to a bestier size, and I'm looking around at what some of the other models are doing, and they're like even bigger. It's like what is going on? But yeah, there's been an explosion. I don't know if I would really call it a competition, but there's a group of like 5 or 6 of us that it seems like we all just keep getting larger and larger. And so I have a kind of an idea in mind of how large I want to go personally, just because of what I think I can handle physically. Even though I'm 6 feet tall, I'm have a pretty small frame. I'm not a big bone girl. So there's only so much that I can carry. You know, so, but yeah, I mean, it's just exploded over the last few years. The biggest one that I can think of right now is Foxy Menagerie. I don't know if you've followed
Yeah,
her.
yeah,
She
obviously, yeah,
has really gone bigger, in the last few months that I've noticed.
yeah, and she's been pretty fast for her growth, so to speak, right? It's been over like last year or so that I noticed it. I don't follow it every day, but I do see it every once in a while because I'm on Instagram, etc. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's pretty amazing. I mean, and like you said, there's like 4 or 5. So if I'm not wrong, you're somewhere in those top like 5 or 6 girls, right?
I think I'm around 5 or 6, as far as, CC size, if you were going to compare that, since we're all varying body types, different heights, different body shapes, one size on one person, will look different on the other. But yeah, my husband kind of keeps up with that, since he's the engineer, he kind of he calls himself a certified bubologist, so he can kind of keep over there, and he'll keep me updated on where I am. Like, oh, honey, I think you're like number 5 or 6 right now. Yeah, so it's actually kind of funny, to see where I rank. But yeah, I'm definitely well into the top 10.
One of the things I always wondered is if you put those women together, would they be nervous to not measure up to the other girls? Again, like you said, it's not necessarily a competition, but I wonder if like you'd really see for real who is the man, who should be one and two, etc. Is that something you'd ever think of doing with those? Just even if it was just like at a runway or whatever.
Yeah, I think it would be kind of fun to get all of us in one room together. If nothing, just to kind of compare and trade stories and talk about how we got to the size that we are. And because I know everybody's journey will be different. Why did they decide to do it? How did they get there? That type of thing. But yeah, I think it would be kind of fun. Not necessarily a contest, but just kind of like a gathering. Kind of more of a party atmosphere.
Yeah, and obviously the fans would like that as well, no doubt.
Oh yeah, but they would love to get all of us on one show or something like that. Yeah, that would be a lot of fun.
What can we expect from you going forward? Like, what is your plans in terms of growth, etc.? I don't know if you can say, but what is your kind of goals going forward if it's not too personal to ask?
Um, there are a few things that hopefully will actually be coming out in the next few weeks. I did film a lot of stuff, like I mentioned before, with a production company down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And in the next month or so, that they're telling me that a lot of that stuff is going to come out. So I think that will be fun for my fans to see. A lot of it is kind of affiliated with a football related type of company. So there'll be something related to that. There's a few more videos coming out. And like I mentioned a few minutes ago, I'm trying to get photo shoots lined up, get more material, to put out there on social media. Got to get that following, got to get those numbers up, and yeah, just kind of see where things go, get in contact with the different people, meet people, see what projects I have going on, and if I might be a good fit for me. It's a fun thing to do. Right now, it's kind of my other thing that I do outside of my regular 9 to 5 job. So hopefully it will turn into something that will be full time, and
That would be
my,
great.
my hobby can turn into a career, is kind of my goal.
Yeah, me and you. I hope that happens for sure. Do you have plans if you want to say something like that going forward? You're going to sit still for a while because of COVID? Do you have to wait a time, or are you kind of where are you on that path?
Right now, I don't see a lot of major changes coming up. Part of that is due to COVID. There's a lot of things that I can't plan to have done with my doctor out in California just because I can't do the travel right now. And honestly, I'm kind of at a point where I'm happy with how things are for right now. So I think I'm going to kind of hold firm where I'm at and just use the diet and exercise to kind of maintain everything, and then kind of maybe go slightly larger maybe sometime next year. But for 2021, I think I'm pretty good for now.
Yeah, well, I just want to say I know I put this in my news post, but I think it's so true. You always hear things are bigger in Texas, and between your height and your size, I mean that can't be more true. Proof positive of that statement, right?
Yes, I am. Yes, it is fun in Texas. And I don't know if I have the biggest boobs in Texas, but if not, I would think I would be one of the top.
Absolutely, as far as what I know.
Yeah,
So,
I think all my competitors are in different parts of the country. I don't think I have any close competition here. So,
okay, good, good. Well, I've really enjoyed talking to you tonight. It's been really great. Um, you know, I hope everything works out the best for you. Obviously, let your fans know about this. I hope you had fun.
yes, Terry, it's been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Okay, great. So thank you for coming into the depths. All right, thank you so much, Gianna. You were great.
Bye, Terry.
Bye bye.